डॉक्टर बाबासाहेब आंबेडकर ओपन यूनिवर्सिटी.
Hello, welcome back to the lecture that we are having on The Stranger by Albert Camus. I welcome you at our studio. Let's start that. So, now we will be talking about the plot diagram of the novel The Stranger. So, whenever we are talking about any plot of the story, it can be divided into four parts. The very first one, where the introduction starts. Any novel, play would have its own introduction. Then you'll have a rising action where the story is taking the peak. Then there will be a point where the story reaches to the level where you can see the climax. Climax means where it is reaching, it's at the higher point, at a level. Then where the story will be winding up, which is called as a falling action. And at the end, everything gets resolved, is called a resolution. Introduction, the story would take the peak, then it is called a rising action. Then your story at one point it is at the peak, so it is called climax. Then it will have a falling action, which means you are trying to wind up. The author is trying to wind up the actions of the story, of the novel, of the play. And then when it's got everything got solved in terms of the story, it's called resolution. So here, when we talk about the introduction, it's when the mortals we get the introduction of the story of this novel when Mersault is attending his funeral. Mersault is attending his mother's funeral. What happens there? You'll get to know that what kind of the protagonist is, where the story is taking place. We get to see that he is a very much like self-centered person, a kind of. He is having his own life rather than like he knew that there is the life had become difficult to live with his mother and him. So he decided to leave her mother at the place where she can be taken care of. So there, we get to know about an introduction. Then comes the rising action. What happens there? There, Mersault becomes sexually involved with Mary. So after the funeral gets over, he comes back home, and then next day she meets Mary, and they are sexually involved. There we are there we can see the peak of the story. Story is now picking up slowly. Then we get to see that Mersault write a letter for Raymond, and he also if you see he kills Aram later on. Then we also see that he is now his character is questioned, his questioned as a person, what kind of person he is. He might not be a good person. Then also if you see he is tried for his character instead of his crime. So he is maybe going to get punished for his character rather than the crime that he commits. So now we are almost at the peak of the story. And what is the peak of the story? Where Mersault is found guilty and sentenced to death. So there comes the climax. If you see, that's the climax where we are too much tensed. Now what would happen? So that's a climax over there. And then if you see Mersault argues with the chaplain. Chaplain is some a lawyer maybe who is trying to convince him that you do not really you start having a faith in God, and you like tries to you try to like convince the court about your character. then you might be saved. That's a falling action that you see. And how does it resolve the story? It The resolution is Morsolt reaffirms his beliefs, but there is no way that he now can like escape the execution. He would be killed, but if you see the resolution, the story winds up with that he reaffirms his belief. So that's a plot diagram of the story. Uh, First, Mursola attends his mother's funeral. Then we have certain rising actions like killing the Arab, being questioned as a person. Then he is actually, like now tired. He's tried for his character instead of his crime, and then the story little bit like falls, or like tries to get wind up with when he argues with the chaplain. But and it is a resolution, that is he reaffirms the beliefs. Let's go ahead. So now we will be talking about the themes of the story. The very first and obvious one is absurdity. Throughout the novel we see that there is an absurdity, so we have to learn what does first absurdity mean. You must be knowing the phenomena of absurd, something that is strange, something that is weird, something that is out of the box context, and you find it like weird. So, absurdity is a philosophical view at which one arrives when one is forced out of a very repetitive existence. Camus himself says that it happens that the stage sets collapse, rising, structure, uh, 4 hours in the office or the factory, meal, structure, 4 hours of work, meal, sleep, and Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, according to the same rhythm. You get so much bored with the life that you are having. Your life becomes absurd as it is a continuous pattern. You get up, you take a bath, you take your breakfast, you go to the workplace, you are done with the day, you come, you sleep, the next day you wake up, and the life continues. The same monotonous life that you are having. This path is easily followed most of the time. That is a conventional path. But one day, the why arises, that why I am doing all this? Why do I really live my life like this? And you start questioning that, and everything begins in that uh, weariness tinged with the amazement. Why do I exist? Why is my life like this? Does this monotonous life have any meaning? When you start thinking about that, you'll find the absurdity in your life. So, when we talk about the stranger, the outsider, Mersol's repetitive life runs smoothly. Then, little by little, this is before 1940s, when there was no World War, maybe. Second World War, I meant. So, he was happy with the smooth life that he was having. His mother was there, though they were not living together. She was, being taken care by the household where she was kept, and he was happy living here. He was having at least a little bit smooth life in his. He was living a smooth life, but then, little by little, Marcel's happy life is pulled apart by the rest of the world's movement, and collapse begins. His mother dies, and with her, a sense of stability he has in. Uh, his mother dies, and with that, even a sense of stability he has uh, had in his life also, dies, it breaks. That stability is not more there. He becomes involved with Mary, who asks whether he cares for her love or not, whether he actually cares about her or not. and in asking nearly breaches his safe isolation. If you see, even his neighbor Raymond insists upon being his friend. Selemario, if you see Selemeno's dog, just disappears. The old man Selemeno, his dog, just disappears, thus disrupting a parallel repetitive rhythm. He shoots a man, and the Lord demands that he die. Each subtle description of Mersault's desire to be indifferently static brings him to a mental crisis. And this crisis resolved when he comes to understand the ultimate truth of the meaninglessness of his individual life within the mystery of the collective society. These events of his story only make sense the way any other explanation leads to this life, which is represented by the priests or a fate. If you see, it's so absurd in a sense that everything breaks down in the courtroom in the law. He was having a smooth life, but look at the absurdity which it brings. In an expression of Camus' humanist logic, neither theology nor this fatal truth or fate can after man of intelligence. In an expression of Camus' humanist logic, neither theology nor even your fate can offer man of intelligence. And here we have a man like Morso, who is willing to use only bare logic to consider the question of life. He says that leave these attachments, leave everything that makes sense to you, just leave this life. Live. An explanation for the absolutely senseless things that humans do, be it war, be it murder, and any other heinous acts. Do we really need that? Do any of these actions, be it killing somebody, being having war with the other countries, have any meaning of life? Why do we really do that? That's what the absurdity of that Camus believed in, and he tries to portray that in Stranger. The alternative, therefore, is absurdity. You might find the character of Morso very absurd, but that's what makes the meaning of out of the life. Life would have no meaning. You create your own meaning. Morso recognizes the truth that life is meaningless. That means life is just what one makes of it. What you make out of your life. That's what life is. Life would have no meaning. Tomorrow I'll die, you'll die. The life would go on. Then why do we need to fight? Why do countries need to have wars? That's what Camus believed in. And he lived during the era. He had lost his father in a war in World War One. He lived during World War Two. It is not Sartre. The Sartre believed in that life has no meaning. Camus believed that you can make the meaning out of your life. Life would have no meaning. You make it. So here, if you see that more so, what he means by life, he means that life is just what one makes of it, while being conscious of two certainties. You have to be very conscious. One is life, and second is death. Even that's what Bhagavad Gita says. Krishna says that the ultimate truth of life is Death. Death is the only permanent. Life is not permanent. You will lose it any day, any time. But till the time you are leaving, makes the meaning out of your life. And it should not, it would have no meaning, but still, in doing so, here Camus, he argues, one would uphold traditional human values because they safeguard one's life. You'll have to, actually have to understand the traditional human values. If you say it in other words, if we put it into other words, what he says is human values, what we understand today as human rights, lead, it leads to the greatest happiness of the greatest number. When one is truly willing to face this truth, one can be happy. Unfortunately, more so is executed before he can leave this fashion. He believed in that, but here he is executed before he could leave that in that fashion. Another theme that we can see in this novel is colonialism. Another theme that we see in this novel is colonialism. There are no hints, it does not have any direct reference to colonialism. But when you read the novel throughout, you can see that half Arabs are suffering. If you see, others are having names. There is Mary, there is more so, even his parents, his family have names. But wherever an Arab person appears, it does not have even any name. His neighbor had a name, Simon, but the the women that Simon was living with, the women that his neighbor was living with, does not have any names. There are no hints which suggest that the novel takes place in the colonized country. There are, however, hints that racial tension exists between the French Algerians and Arabs. From the first page, the reader knows that the novel is set in Algeria and that the date of publication is 1942. The even if you see the setting or the time, it's 1940s, right? And Algeria was the colonized country at that time, a French colony. Therefore, it can be suggested that this novel occurs in a colonized setting. In addition to that, the narrator hints that at the racial tension by telling the story if it took place solely among some French people who happen to live in Algeria. More so, if you see particularly, is only associates with the French Algerians, and the only people he names are French Algerians. Then, for if you see no apparent reason, he shoots an Arab, very colonized one. As I told you, that none of the Arabs in the whole novel, including the murderer victim, receives a name, not even the wife of his neighbor. In fact, the nurse at the nursing house is given abscess that requires her to wear bandaging on her face. In fact, the nurse at the nursing home is given no other attribute aside from having an abscess that requires her to wear bandaging on her face. The reader sees her as marked by the condition, and she is described as an Arab. Again, that nurse even does not have any names, and she is wearing a bandaging on her face. The reader gains little information about her. Another Arab woman, if you see, is Raymond's girlfriend. She accused him of being a pimp. and he bids her. She does not even have any name. In fact, Morsol's comments on her name, saying, when he told me the woman's name, I realized she was Moorish. It does not bother him that his friend is having relations with an Arab, nor does it bother him that Raymond wants to mark her for cheating on him. He wants to cut her nose off in the tradition manner of marking a prostitute. Look at the treatment that is done to this Arab women. You can see that how colonized the novel is, how colonized structure that novel has. The third theme we can think of this novel is it is not fully existentialism of Sartre, which throughout the lecture we have talked about. Neither it is Nietzsche's nihilist novel. He also did not identify him as an existentialist. He himself in the preface says that I do not believe in any philosophy. He believes in human values. He agreed with some proponents of existentialist thoughts that life does not have any inherent meaning. But at the same time, he criticizes that others for their pursuit of personal meaning. Life has its personal meanings. It would have no meaning, but you can make the meaning out of it. Camus's concept of the absurd, instead, it implored people to accept the reality that is life's lack of meaningless. You accept the truth that life does not have any meaning. At the same time, you make your own meaning of the life. Accepting the truth, life, the ultimate death, accept that. The moment you accept the ultimate truth, that at the end we are going to die, the death is the ultimate truth, does not stop us to live the life, though it does not have any meaning. That's what Camus argues. Camus's concept of the absurd instead implored people to accept life's lack of meaninglessness. And you have to rebel by rejoicing in what life offers you, what life does offer. Every day you have to live that life. You have to rejoice. That's what gives the meaning to life. Baby when it is born does not have any name. You give the name to that baby. Likewise, live your life every day and give it a meaning. So elements of this philosophy can be seen in the Morso, our protagonist. He refuses to behave as if there is meaning where there is none. Or if you see, Camus himself put it into a preface to the stranger that Meursault does not play the game. Everybody is playing game here by acting what it is not, by behaving what it is not sticking to the truth. They are leaving for others there to show off. They are playing game. Our protagonist does not play such kind of games. Society thus feels threatened that how could this protagonist, how could Morso go against the norms that we have decided? How they are feeling threatened. What if people start living like life like Morso? What people stop believing in the religion? What people stop believing in God? They will lose our business, maybe according to them, and they feel terrified. They feel threatened, and what they do in return, they just execute. They just cuts off the head of this man. They just cut off the head of this man more so. Similar themes you can also see in the myth of the Sisyphus collection of his, which was published at the same time in 1942. He has its own view of the philosophy that Camus brought. Let's have a look at the style of this novel. if you look at the narrative, it has a psychological self exclamations are common in French first person narrate. But if you look at his Camus' work, specifically this novel, The Stranger, it gives the techniques of psychological depth a new twist at the time. It was published when it was published, it gave a new twist. We have a new kind of hero in The Stranger. Instead of allowing the protagonist to detail aesthetic psychology for the readers, the action and the behavior of that protagonist is given to us. And we feel, we feel to decipher. Camus did this because he felt that uh, psychology is action, our psychology, our thinking process. Our psychology is action, not thinking about oneself. What we behave, what we act is what it speaks about us. I don't, characters do not really need the biographical details. The way they treat others, their behavior, their actions speak about them. Camus did that in his novel. Here, if you look at the example of the protagonist, along with a failure to explain everything to the reader, he refuses to justify himself to other characters. He does not even try to does not try to justify. He tells only what he is thinking and what he is perceiving. When he is, if you remember, when his mother dies, he even refuses to look at the coffin of her. He smokes a cigarette, which was considered as a crime. It is looked down action. You can't do that when your mother is dead there in front of you. You have to mourn. He doesn't mourn. He doesn't cry. I physically, he would be emotionally broken, but he does not show. His actions talks about what kind of ideology, what kind of psychology that he has. He does not interrupt with the commentary. By narrating the story this way, through the most indifferent food scene, the reader is also drawn into Morsol's perspective. We get to see the perspective of Morsol, that what he believes about the life. The audience even feels the absurdity of the events. However, other characters who even do not, like have the benefit of hearing the whole of Morsol's story, as the book's readers do, prefer their ideas of him. They are only to readers to make judgments at the trial. Moreover, if you see, they readily condemn him to the death as he is like a monster, he is like a heartless person without regret, which is not actually the truth. So, this kind of narrative comes up where the psychology of the person, like speaks. He's a new kind of hero that Camus brought. Camus also divides the story at the murder. We have the story in two parts: before the murder and after the murder, in two parts. Part 1 opens with the death of her mother and ends with the murder of the Arab. Both the, if you see the first part, starting with mother's death, ending with Arab's murder, and if you see the part 2, if you read the part 2, Marceau is in prison, and at the end, he is awaiting his execution. The way it starts, it ends. The division reinforces the importance of Marceau and the universe of the story. Normality is jailed throughout the first part until it dissolves into uh, bec- until it dissolves into chaos because of the murder. The second half shows the force of law entering to re-establish meaning and therefore bring back order to the death of Morse. If you look at the structure and the language of the novel, are technically at one with the greater theme of absurdity. Look at the structure, narrative. Once you read, you'll get to see about it. Two paths, extremely different you might feel, but connects there. Let's talk a little bit about the structure and the language of the novel. If you look at the Camus's narration was immediately recognized as an extremely innovative because the new idea that he has brought, he is bringing a character through the psychology rather than his biography. His psychology is like his actions. He doesn't speak much, but readers get to see what he believes in through his actions. And if you see the language, while recognized as similar to the American Hemingway's style, uh, I would want you to read while you are reading The Stranger, or if you complete reading Stranger, go back to Old Man and the Sea by Hemingway. You'll see that Morso, or the character of Morso, or maybe the whole style of the writing of Camus, it reflects Hemingway's style. If you see the characters of the old man in The Old Man and the Sea, we get to see through the actions the psychology of that old man was seen as so appropriate. It is so appropriate to the task as to be hardly borrowed. The style that Camus is one of the direct speech that does not allow much description. It does not have too much of description everywhere. It's the direct speech there. Even if you see, Camus chose that style because it backed up his narrative technique. The reader here is focused on the character's reactions. How does he react? See, if you see when his mother dies, how does he react? When the Mary proposes, how does he react? When his neighbor asks him for the help, how does he react? Even when he is caught, when he kills, when he goes to the court, how does he react? And if you see the behavior as they are related through Morso. We'll talk about what kind of critical reviews that Camus received for this particular work. If you look at the success of The Stranger, it has been matched by unceasing flow of criticism. Continuously, even till today, it has got a great appreciations from the critics. And most of those critical reviews, or most of the critical views, that has been a positive affirmation. Even though if you see the novel is so dark, the philosophy, the whole story is so dark, of so dark days, it is a positive affirmation of Camus's place as a master of French literature. If you read Sartre, you might feel depressed, that you'll have an existential crisis about the life. But when you read The Stranger or Myth of Sisyphus by Camus, he says, and I repeat it again, that find out the meaning from the life which does not have any meaning. You make the meaning out of life. Like Morso, who tried to do that. He was executed, that's fine. Maybe not, but it's fine. If you see one reviewer or maybe one critic, you can say, even described Camus as the writer America had been waiting for since Hemingway. He's placed the second to Hemingway when it comes to novel writing. The criticism has also had the effect, you say good or bad, of rendering the novel a moral treatise. This occurred early on when Jean Paul Sartre reviewed the work in 1943 and said, among other things, that with this work, Albert Camus takes his place in the great tradition of those French moralists. There's a moral value that it talks about. And even if you see the recent one of the critics or recent in one of the recent articles published by Philip Thody, he says that this is a misleading approach to the stranger. Which one? The Sartre, which we talked about, that Camus is one of those French moralists, in a sense that the stranger, since in moral terms the novel is full of contradictions, it does not have any morality. It is, if you see the whole, when you read it again and again, it has so many contradictions, you can't have one stand. It's almost like reading Shakespeare's play. You can't take anybody's side. There are a lot of contradictions, and you'll, even if you take one stand, the other would not be the wrong. Whereas if read for the absurd, thereby no breakdown exists. There is no breakdown. And with this, we pay great tribute to this such an amazing French writer, Albert Camus, for teaching us to find out the meaning out of the life. With this, thank you for joining the lecture. We'll see you in the next class.
स्वाध्यायः परमं तप